Do you remember how you learned to talk? Neither do I. It just somehow happened. In the beginning of your life, you were babbling incoherently, and then gradually, as if by magic, those babbles started turning into real words. It wasn't a conscious thing. You hadn't gone to school to learn those words. You didn't sit down at a desk with a textbook and try to memorize vocabulary. You were just jabbering away as usual, when one day you looked inside yourself, and there it was. Your first real word. Over time, other new words began showing up in your vocabulary too. Again, quite spontaneously. It was so easy and natural. One day you didn't know a word, and the next day you did. So quick was this process that by the time you started your first day at school, you could already talk quite fluently. In fact, learning to talk was probably the easiest bit of learning that you've ever done. It was as though you were just absorbing the information from the air around you. And you were. There's a word for this natural, unconscious learning that we're talking about here. It's called osmosis. Osmosis is defined in the dictionary as the gradual or unconscious assimilation or adoption as of ideas. So basically, osmosis is the kind of learning that happens without you being aware of it. Human beings are like sponges. We absorb information from our environment really easily. I mean, incredibly easily. In fact, it's been estimated that we are only consciously aware of 10% of what we're absorbing at any given time. The other 90% of what is going into our mind through our ears and our eyes and other senses is happening at a subconscious or unconscious level. Said another way, it's been estimated that we absorb 34 gigabytes of information each day, and 30 gigabytes of that is happening at an unconscious level. Now, it's important to realize that whatever we absorb and internalize, we will naturally then reproduce. So whatever words you absorbed through osmosis as a child, you would then start using those words in your daily life, at school, with your friends. Others would hear the words from you, they would absorb them, then they would start using them in their daily lives. Whatever words came in, you would then start speaking out again. And this is how words circulate around society, until eventually everyone has a common knowledge of the same pool of words. And of course, in language, this is good. It means that we can then communicate with each other, and we all know what those words mean. Now, ideas circulate in exactly the same way. So as we go through life, we unconsciously absorb through osmosis ideas, information, facts, pieces of knowledge, opinions. Again, much of the time we don't even realize that this is happening. It's just that one day we look inside ourselves and we see an opinion there, a fact, a piece of knowledge. We don't know how it got there. We didn't go to school for it. We didn't consciously study this. It's just there inside of us. And because it's there, we assume that it's true and then start reproducing that idea to other people. Others hear, absorb, and they perpetuate that idea to other people. And this is how ideas also spread around society. The idea circulates until everyone has a common knowledge of it. And indeed, these ideas collectively then become known as the pool of common knowledge, or actually general knowledge, it's mostly called. There are things that we all know, but we don't really know how we know. We didn't consciously learn them. We just look inside ourselves and we see opinions, facts, ideas, knowledge, things that we just absorbed unconsciously by osmosis from our environment. So let me give you 3 examples of osmosis in action. Firstly, I know that many years ago there was a TV show called Breaking Bad. Now, I never watched the show. I heard the premise once and it sounded horrible, so I never watched it. And I don't remember seeing adverts for it either. It was on Sky TV in the UK, which I don't have, so I've never seen the show. And yet when someone mentions that show to me, I get this mental image in my head of a shaven-headed guy with glasses, who I assume to be the main character. And I also see the colour yellow for some reason. Now, for the purposes of this video, I went to find a clip. This is actually the first clip that I've ever seen, and I was right. It is about a shaven-headed guy with glasses. I knew this information. I just don't know how I knew this information. I must have just absorbed it unconsciously from the world around me. A second example of osmosis in action. Have you ever had someone ask where the car keys are? And without ever consciously being aware of seeing them, there's just something at the back of your mind that says that they might be on the side table by the window. So you say, I think they might be on the side table by the window. And sure enough, that's exactly where they are. Now, how did you know that? Well, you knew the answer because your brain was registering this information about the world around you, even when you weren't aware of it. And a final example of osmosis in action. Have you ever been listening to a song in the radio and suddenly found yourself being able to sing along to that song without ever consciously learning the lyrics? Well, how did they find their way into your brain? Well, what's happened is that song has been playing in the background as you've been going about your life. Maybe in shops and restaurants, you've just been absorbing those words unconsciously. And now when you look inside yourself, you know them, you can sing along. These are just a few examples of osmosis in action. Now, osmosis can obviously be a fantastic thing because it means that we are constantly learning and growing in knowledge with no effort whatsoever. Just as we learn to talk with no effort, we're always learning about the world around us with no effort. However, sometimes osmosis can go wrong. Sometimes we don't absorb the information quite as accurately as we'd like to think. So take the song lyrics for example. Sometimes a song comes on the radio and we look inside ourselves and we think we know the lyrics, we think that we can sing along, but actually something's gone wrong.
You know all about karaoke? When you're singing on a karaoke, you haven't got a clue that those were words. I was singing Take That, Back for Good. Wash your back, wash your back, wash your back. Want your back? What's this? Want your back? I've been singing Wash Your Back 15 years. It's only when you go on a karaoke and you see lyrics, that's what they're supposed to be singing. You know that song, We Are Family? For years I thought they were singing, Just Let Me Staple the Vicar. Right? Who's right and who's wrong here? Listen.
All of the people around us, they say, can they be that close? Just let me staple the vicar.
Apparently, according to Michael, your burgers are the best.
I can hear your prayers, your burdens I will bear.
So Peter Kay thought he picked up the lyrics, he looked inside himself and he certainly thought he had the right information, but he didn't really. He'd actually made a mistake. Now what's more, sometimes the information itself that's being passed around society is actually wrong. Sometimes the ideas that are in the pool of general knowledge are just not true. Most of the time, wrong ideas don't make it into the pool of general knowledge because each person who hears the information effectively acts as a screen. So for example, if I was to say that grass is red, and I was to start trying to circulate that information around society, at some point, someone nearby to me is going to hear that and they're going to correct it. They're going to go, hang on a second, you've got that wrong, it isn't red, it's green. And they would stop that idea in its tracks. They wouldn't absorb it, they wouldn't pass it on, they would shut it down. That idea would be stopped from going any further into the pool of general knowledge. But this system of self-regulation, it doesn't always work. Sometimes false ideas do enter into circulation and they do get passed around until they do get established in the pool of general knowledge. Therefore, it's possible for everyone in a society to believe something that simply isn't true. Now let me show you what that looks like in action. For this next section, Fuel Project volunteers went out onto the streets and they asked random members of the public a series of 8 general knowledge questions. Let's take a look and see how that went.
Frankenstein.
Say Frankenstein?
Frankenstein.
Looks like Frankenstein.
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 Frankenstein?
Frankenstein.
As you can see, everyone's giving the answer Frankenstein here, and that's not surprising because that's the answer that exists in the pool of general knowledge. Most people in the world would say Frankenstein to this. However, it's not actually true. Victor Frankenstein is in fact the name of the scientist who created the monster. The monster itself doesn't have a name. Okay, question 2.
What fruit did Adam and Eve eat in the Garden of Eden?
Apple.
Apple. Apple. Apple.
Apple.
An apple.
The apple.
They were not told to eat the apple.
An apple.
The forbidden fruit is an apple.
Most people looked inside themselves and saw the answer apple to this question. And again, that's not surprising. That information is in the pool of general knowledge. Most people would say apple to this question. However, the Bible never actually specifies what kind of fruit Adam and Eve ate. We've just been unconsciously influenced by popular depictions over the years. Question 3.
How many senses does a human being have?
5.
5.
5.
5.
5.
Well, we are always told about the 5 senses.
5?
5.
Most people looked inside themselves and saw the number 5 to this question. And again, that's not surprising. That is the general knowledge answer. But actually, we have at least 9 senses and maybe as many as 21. These include a sense of pain, a sense of body position, a sense of balance, temperature, and a spider sense. Only joking. Question number 4.
What color of a rag makes a bull charge?
Red.
Red.
Red. Red.
Red. Red.
Red. Red. So red.
Red. Red.
Red.
Again, they're all giving the general knowledge answer here. Most people would say red to this question. But again, it's wrong. Tests have proven that no specific colour makes a bull charge. It's actually the aggressive waving of the cape that makes them charge. We've just been unconsciously influenced throughout the years by cartoons and TV shows to think that bulls hate the colour red. It's not true. Question 5.
Beans.
Coffee beans.
Coffee bean. Coffee beans.
Coffee bean. Coffee beans?
Coffee beans.
Coffee beans. Coffee beans. Coffee beans?
Coffee beans.
Coffee beans?
Coffee beans and water.
Everyone looked inside themselves and saw the answer coffee beans here. And again, everyone knows this, it's general knowledge. I would have said exactly the same thing to this question. But again, it's actually wrong. These are classified as seeds rather than beans. Question 6.
Come on, head.
Head.
Probably your head.
The head. Head. Your head?
Head.
The head. Your head.
Your head.
I want to say it's the head.
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 Everyone looked inside themselves and saw the answer, the head, to this question. And again, this is general knowledge. Most people would say this. But in fact, a person's head makes up around 7% of their skin surface area, and 7 to 10% of our body heat is lost through the head. Therefore, it is completely proportional. Question 7.
Why do chameleons change color?
As a form of like protection. When they sense danger, they change color to
Blend in.
blend in.
Camouflage themselves.
To blend in with their surroundings, avoid predators.
Oh, to protect themselves.
Defense mechanism. To match their surrounding for protection.
In order to hide from predators.
To adapt to their environment, their camouflage. Camouflage their surrounding environment.
Everyone looked inside themselves and saw the answer camouflage to this question, to avoid predators. Again, this is the general knowledge answer. However, chameleons can run at 21 miles per hour, which is enough to outrun most predators. In fact, the main reason that they change colour is just to reflect their mood, for expression, or to adjust to various temperatures. Like this one, he isn't fitting in with the background, he's just having a good time changing colour. And then finally, question 8.
What is the capital of Australia?
Sydney?
Sydney. Sydney.
Sydney.
Sydney?
Sydney.
Everyone looked inside themselves and saw the answer Sydney to this question. That's the general knowledge answer. Most people would say that, but it's also a mistake. The capital of Australia is actually Canberra. So the purpose of that quiz was just to show that we all absorb ideas through osmosis that can sometimes be wrong. And we don't ever discover that we're wrong until we personally investigate and consciously apply some critical thinking to the issue. In the meantime, we just look inside ourselves, we see some information there, we assume that it must be true, and so feel confident enough to start sharing that information with other people. And so the mistakes circulate around society from person to person until they become considered part of general knowledge. There's a lot of pollution in the pool of general knowledge, is basically what I'm trying to say. A lot of bad information swirling about in there that actually doesn't deserve to be there. Okay, now here's the next problem. We don't like to think that we're being unconsciously influenced like this. We like to think that we're very rational, sane, intelligent, logical beings. We like to think that if an idea exists within us, then it must have some merit to be there. It must be true. We wouldn't believe something if it was false. We don't like to think of ourselves as being gullible or easily influenced in things like this. So whatever information we find within us, we tend to take ownership of that idea. If we see an idea within us, then we tend to assume that's our idea. Okay, so here's the process I'm basically trying to describe. So our environment is unconsciously planting ideas within us without our knowing. We don't even know this is happening. It's just... And yet when we look inside ourselves and see one of those ideas, We think, oh, that must be mine. This is my idea. This is what I think on the issue. This is what I came up with on the issue. See, because it crept into our heads without our knowing, then once we do notice it, we assume, oh, that's my idea. I think this. And once we assume that it's our idea, we then develop an urge to defend it. Our pride steps in to give that idea protection. And this defensiveness can happen even on quite inconsequential issues. I mean, even like these questions that we just asked. If I were to say to some of these people, actually that's not Frankenstein, he isn't called Frankenstein, then it's possible that some of them would take that in a surprisingly defensive way. Of course it's Frankenstein. You think I'm stupid? You think I'm gullible? You think I don't know this character's name? Mark Twain once said, it is far easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled. You see, once someone has been fooled, in the sense that they've absorbed a false idea and taken ownership of that idea, their pride makes it difficult to admit their mistake. They're now personally invested in being right. They're now personally invested in that guy being called Frankenstein. Because if he's not, and if they've believed it this whole time, then that could suggest some bad things about them. It could suggest that they've been stupid or gullible, things that people don't want to be. All this leads to a situation where people can often be found fiercely defending and promoting ideas that didn't originate with them, that aren't even true, but which they just unconsciously absorbed from their environment. You'll therefore find people arguing strongly that this character is Frankenstein and that coffee does come from coffee beans, not because it's true or because they've really investigated it, but simply because that's the information they find within themselves when they look. And if it's within them, then it must be true, their pride says so. And quite often in this situation, they'll also take confidence from the fact that most other people around them think the same way they do. They'll take solace from being part of a herd. So they'll say things like, of course that's Frankenstein. Everyone calls him Frankenstein. Hey Steve, what's this character over here called? Steve shouts over, it's Frankenstein. See, even Steve calls him Frankenstein. Everybody calls him Frankenstein. They're taking solace from the fact that if Steve believes it, and if Linda believes it, if we all believe it, then it must be true. But again, just because everyone believes something, just because it's in the pool of general knowledge, it doesn't make it true. There's a lot of pollution swirling about in that pool of general knowledge. Of course, what does it matter if people are mistaken about Frankenstein's name or they call these coffee beans? Not a great deal in the long run. And it's not going to hurt anyone if people are singing the wrong words to karaoke songs either. That's just funny. But what if people are carrying around false ideas through osmosis about much bigger issues? I'm going to put it to you that the average non-Christian on the street has put no more thought into their ideas of God, the origins of life, the meaning of life, the Bible, the resurrection of Jesus, that they put no more thought into those things than they have into their ideas of Frankenstein and coffee beans. I'm going to suggest that sure, they look inside themselves and they see ideas there about God, about Jesus, about the Bible, but they've never really applied critical thinking to those ideas. Those ideas have just been planted there through their environment, through osmosis, rather than through conscious personal investigation. You think you know about these things. There's certainly an answer inside you when you look and you feel confident enough to share that answer with other people, but you've never actually read the Bible. You've never really investigated its claims. You've never actually studied history. Therefore, the answers that you think are yours, the answers that you see when you look inside you, are not really yours. In reality, you've merely conformed your opinions, your attitudes, to the world around you, meaning that you're just a product of your environment, your culture, as it stands at this moment in the 21st century. Here's what the Bible says. It says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So the Bible very insightfully highlights that we have two options in life. We can proactively search, think, question, scrutinize, and grow in knowledge, and that's what it encourages us to do. But if we don't do that, then the default position will be that we'll just start conforming to the pattern of the world around us. Whatever your culture currently believes, you'll believe it too. Whatever is circulating around the ether, you'll passively absorb that information through osmosis, and culture's ideas will become your ideas. The world's opinions will become your opinions. You'll just conform to your environment and start believing and speaking up for things that you've never really investigated. And again, I believe that describes the majority of non-Christians out there. They're just going with the cultural flow. Now let me illustrate. Around 30 years ago, in the United Kingdom, almost nobody thought that homosexuality was inborn or a valid alternative lifestyle. Almost no one. 15% it was in 1987. And yet today, most people believe that homosexuality is inborn and a valid lifestyle. And this includes people who were alive in 1987 and who used to hold the contrasting opinion. Now, they haven't changed their mind because they investigated the science. And the reason that I know this is because there is no science. There have been a lot of studies, but today there is still no conclusive scientific evidence that anyone is born gay. So they didn't change their mind because they investigated any facts. No, the reason that they changed their mind is because there's been a cultural flow towards homosexual acceptance through the media, through culture, and they've adapted themselves to the herd mentality. Steve believes it now, Linda believes it now, everyone in the office believes it now, so they feel like they should believe it now too. You see what I'm getting at? You've gone with the herd. And yet when you see your opinion on homosexuality within you, you genuinely think that you came up with these ideas. This is what I think about homosexuality. These are my thoughts on homosexuality. And you'll defend quite vociferously your thoughts on homosexuality now, even though they're not really yours. You've just conformed to the pattern of the world around you. Now, I'm going to wrap up this first episode by saying that if you were playing along with the quiz earlier and you realised that you picked up some wrong ideas about Frankenstein and coffee beans and Sydney being the capital of Australia, then consider for just a moment that you may have also picked up some wrong ideas about God and Christianity, the Bible, the meaning of life. I mean, have you really investigated what you believe about these things? These things are too important not to thoroughly check out. They're too important just to take by osmosis from the culture. I mean, this is the meaning of life that we're talking about. This is potentially your eternity that we're talking about. Socrates once said that the unexamined life is not worth living. So let's examine the questions of life together in this series. That's what this series is all about, investigating the big questions. Christianity done well, Christianity as the Bible commands, is about thinking and questioning and filtering so that we might not be unwittingly brainwashed and passively conform to the culture around us. So that's what I'm inviting you to do. This is episode 1. Subscribe to this channel, subscribe to the Fuel Project on social media to be notified of new videos. And let's go on this journey together. Let's investigate the big questions.